Hi again, it's Ryan Miller with Etna Interactive, and we're going to talk today about a phenomenon that I'm calling the online patient migration. A little hint here, people are moving away from your website. Where I want to start in the short video is just to kind of build the case for what I see as a phenomenon that's only going to kind of increase in the impact that it's having on your practice. So if we look at this graph here, this is data about search activity on Google, differentiating between the blue line there that you see decreasing, which is the volume of search that's happening on desktop computers, and the orange line there that reflects the volume of activity, the search that's happening on mobile devices. We see that second line there looking at all of our time that's spent in mobile online. And the pretty clear trend here is that people are moving away from desktop activities and they're moving towards more consumption on mobile. And why that becomes important to this particular phenomenon that I'm talking about is, let's look at this example on your screen. So we see a mobile search result today. We see a couple of ads. At the top, you see the map result there, and then directly below it, you see the first of the business listings that show up that are local results. Now, what's important to note about this particular result is it includes a business name. It includes a link to dial the practice directly, but it doesn't include a link to the practice's website. So let's kind of keep going a little bit deeper here. Let's look specifically at this particular result set, performing a search for Botox in San Francisco. And what you'll notice that I've bracketed in orange here is Yelp, 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 dominating the search results. Now this is admittedly more common among some of the commoditized procedures where patients maybe don't differentiate so much as look for bargains and deals. But increasingly, we see sites like Yelp and Healthgrades and Vitals and RateMDs. In the aesthetic marketplace, we see sites like RealSelf dominating the first few listings that appear for medical searches in those search results. Now, if I were to go to Yelp, the point that I'm going to begin to make here is just as with mobile, people no longer need to go to your website to initiate contact with your practice. When we look at Yelp, using them as kind of an exemplar for all of those directory and review sites, people can actually initiate direct contact. Here we see the private messaging on the Yelp platform. They can initiate direct content inside of these third-party websites. Now let's go a little bit deeper. Let's talk about social media. People can directly tweet you on Twitter. They can use the private messaging function on Facebook. And we see an example here where the Facebook messaging platform, this isn't the public wall where all of your posts are seen on Facebook. These are messages that are contained inside of Facebook where patients are choosing to communicate there rather than by email or by phone. Now, in the aesthetic industry, I'll use an example here of a site like RealSelf that's become incredibly popular. Looking back just a few months ago, I know the numbers are actually higher today. Roughly 25,000 private messages that are delivered every month directly inside of their platform. Now, we combine that knowledge, the idea that people are and have the option today to communicate with your practice on Facebook, on Yelp, directly through calls from local search results, on third-party platforms like RealSelf, with, well, data from the aesthetic industry that in 2014 the market shrunk a little bit. Or we can look at data in the ophthalmology in the LASIK space, and we see that we're kind of in a slump still around the LASIK procedure as one example. And so we ask ourselves, we step back and say, look, if the market is shrinking or remaining at a static level, and we know that patients are moving to communicate on these third-party platforms, then just to hold market share, or if I have any hope of gaining and growing in my practice, I really need to go to where the patient is located. I need to be able to communicate. My staff, my office needs to be able to communicate with the patient on their preferred platform. So the second idea that I want to introduce that I think should be one of your big takeaways from today's short video is that SEO today isn't enough, that we can't worry about just making your site rank well. As we saw in the example in the local search results, we need to do well in local if we want to dominate those increasing number of mobile searches. And we have to worry about our presence on sites like, even though we may not love them, on sites like Yelp or Healthgrades or Vitals in order to capture the patients who are going to initiate contact on those platforms. So my message for you, the takeaway for your practice, where I'd like to see you devote some energy, is really in focusing on following the patient, right? moving your contact, your comfort with contact to these third-party platforms. So as we look at mobile devices, what's the message? What do we need to do? We really need to be focused, and this is something we have long focused on for our own clients, is to target top rankings for the local or the maps search results so that you can hold the share of market that's now going to be shifted towards directly calling your practice in a way perhaps from visiting your website. Cultivating a positive reputation is also incredibly important on those third-party review sites. Now we've talked about, I think, many practices. If you are interested, we have other webinars that are recorded on this particular topic about the fact that you really can't bury your head in the sand anymore. Sites like Yelp are incredibly visible in the medical space. And what we find today is that the data shows that the consumption of reviews is now second only for doctors, is now second only to the consumption of reviews for restaurants. So being well reputed on these third-party websites increases your chance of capturing the customer, the potential patient that wants to communicate there. What are the big ones? Yelp and HealthGrade seem to dominate the market in the US in particular. Now, it's not too late to get active on sites like RealSelf or other industry-specific websites where you know patients are shifting. So look at potentially devoting and placing some time in those areas. Now, we also want to work on accumulating a social following, because what we find today is there is a body of patients who are only going to want to communicate with you on Facebook, or they prefer to use Instagram or Twitter for messaging. And at the end of the day, when we bring all of these ideas together, it's about responding, about not resisting the fact that the patient is moving and refusing to communicate with them on their chosen platform, but being equipped inside your office with the people and the skill sets to hold on to the share of market that you already have, or hopefully gain some additional market share by being one of the first practices in your area that's really effective on these other communication platforms. So let's go back to that slide that I showed you just a moment ago. You'll remember this is the private messaging interface on Yelp. Now I randomly selected, this isn't a client of ours, I randomly selected a medical spa in the Yelp market that was showing up for that Botox search that I showed you earlier in the presentation. And I want you to kind of get close to your screen and squint in there and look at it and notice what it says about how long I might expect to wait before this clinic gets back in touch with me. Well, it says 4 weeks. Right? That this practice on average is getting back to private messages from Yelpers in 4 weeks. Are any of your patients going to tolerate, would they sit and let the phone ring for 4 weeks? So my question back to you is, why would you take someone who's expressing an interest in your business and make them wait to receive any kind of communication from you? You certainly wouldn't tolerate the phone being left unanswered. So as we dive in, we look just a little bit closer still, looking at that data I shared with you from the aesthetic industry's popular website called RealSelf. We happen to have a great relationship with them and ask candidly, say, well, how are doctors doing with those 25,000 private messages that are coming through your site directly? With some chagrin, their CEO shared with me that today it's a big problem because 40% of those messages, these are interested patients, educated patients who are looking to connect with the practice, and 40% of their private messages today are going unanswered. Now, I don't think that practices in this case are trying to willfully neglect them. They're just not equipped and focused on managing communications across these other platforms. And here for you, for the savvy practice, here's the opportunity to do a better job and capture more of your market share. So what is the optimal response time? If I have to watch across all these platforms, I know some of you are shrugging your shoulders and rolling your eyes. Really, how are we going to do this? What's that optimal response time? It's 5 minutes. It's not 5 minutes because the patient is unreasonable. It's 5 minutes because the patient chose email in the same way they might choose a phone call. And they're expecting that call, albeit a digital call, to go answered by your practice. And past 5 minutes, that mom has moved on to the rest of her day and she's taking the kids somewhere, that professional, she's back at her desk and working on a project and her break has ended. So responding quickly is incredibly important. At the end of the day, as you wait longer and longer, the data shows you are quickly less and less likely of ever seeing that patient for the consultation. And what does your staff need to be able to do today? They need to be able to monitor those third-party message platforms. And they need to know which ones you're on, how frequently they might monitor them, whether or not those platforms will send you an email alert to let you know that a message is waiting, so that we can build a schedule around what we can wait to hear, which sites we can wait to hear from, and which sites we need to remind ourselves to go in and check proactively. So as we sum all these things up and we talk about following the migration, you just need to make sure that when you look at your online marketing mix, that you are focused in local as well as traditional organic search engine optimization, that you are encouraging reviews, not just on Google+, but also on the major review sites, even sites you may not love like Yelp, because we know today that these are incredibly visible in search and that patients are capable and likely to message you there directly. If you're using something like Real Self for your industry in the aesthetic space, be sure that you consider doing a pro upgrade so you can get the link back to your site. And take the time to cultivate that social following, because on those social platforms, say, it becomes a very good way to market directly to potential patients and for them to message your practice. And then finally, make sure, and this is perhaps the biggest message of the whole recording today, make sure that your staff is aware where the locations where you might receive direct messages from patients, and that they are actively monitoring those different channels and capable of managing communications inside that new and diverse space. So all of that said, if you do want to learn more, remember we've got a lot of great information at etnainteractive.com. You can follow us on Facebook. If you have questions, feel free to email me directly at ryan@etnainteractive.com. Thank you very much. And as always, feel free to comment below the video and share your feedback or additional questions that we can answer online.